The next item is number 5, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Queens at 213-1738th Drive in the Douglaston Historic District, docket number 15-395, Plot 5, Block 8059, Lot 30, a vacant lot created by a subdivision. The application is to construct a new house and install a driveway and curb cut.
Typical.
Good morning, Commissioners. Abby Hurlip, Preservation Staff. The application is to construct a new building, a new two-story colonial revival style building at the empty subdivided lot here on 38th Drive, located between 233rd Street and 234th Street in the Douglaston Historic District. In addition to the new building, the application is to include a new curb cut, the concrete driveway, and a brick retaining wall with cast stone coping along this eastern portion of the lot. And the applicant is here to discuss the details of this proposal.
Good morning. My name is Oscar Martinez, representing Gino Longo Architect. We have here a proposal for a new building. Our building our site isn't parallel, so we made the front of the building parallel to the street side. Because most of the buildings in our district are parallel to the street line. It also gives a perspective of the side yards being bigger than they really are.
Good morning, my name is Ruth Pinheiro, and I also represent Gino Longo Architects. The design of the building, it's a Central Hall colonial revival, and it just has a extended front entrance with windows flanking on either side, and it just has your typical center entrance with your living spaces downstairs and your bedrooms on the second floor. We also proposed a cellar so that we have the garage enclosed into the home, rather than having an exterior garage or having the car sitting in the driveway as an open parking space, which wouldn't look so nice in the neighborhood at times. This is our proposed elevation. We have, as I said before, we have the windows flanking on either side of the entrance, the door with the typical side lights for your colonial revival. We also have the coins and also the keystones, all going to be done in white precast stone. And we for the entrance, we have a large stairway leading up to our entrance. We made it like 8 feet, the steps 8 feet wide to give it a more open space. As you can see here, the garage is actually, the entrance to the garage is in the rear of the building, so that it doesn't stand out as much. There are a lot of buildings in the area that do have them on the side, but on the side it really didn't work for the size of our lot, so we ended up putting it in the rear yard. Also, as you can see here,
As you can see here, our property actually slopes down.
yeah, this is our property right here.
Slopes down. So, and what we did too, we have a flood-based plane, which we had. The minimal design is 2 feet. We made it 3 feet because of the flood insurance. It could be expensive. So just to be above design and have the flood-based plane better design, we made it an extra foot. Even though our stairs are a little high, most of the stairs in the entrance and in the landmarks area are higher because their property actually slopes up instead of out slopes down. So we made the retaining wall to even out the zoning. The ZR 2342 states that we're allowed to fill up to the street line. That's exactly what we did. These are the renderings for the, so you can see how it slopes down. We actually are retained for this property too to design and build another building.
The retaining wall will be a brick retaining wall on a concrete foundation. There are existing trees that we are going to be preserving on site. We didn't put them in the rendering because we wanted to be able to see the building with more visibility. We didn't want to cloud it all up. But there are 2 trees that we are proposing to remove. One actually ends up right here by the foundation of the building, and one is actually, you can't see it in this angle, but it'll actually be in the driveway. Other than that, all of the mature trees that will be on site will be retained and preserved.
Have you thought of berming up, you know where you've got the retaining wall? Have you thought about actually putting a softer sort of landscape and a berm?
Rather than the retaining wall?
Right, because it's very, at least from that previous, right, the rendering, it just looks very stark.
Right. It does.
Well, like we said, we're also retained to do that property, so we might do something different on the other side.
Right, but that's not before us, and that
Right.
could happen, that doesn't, we're just thinking about in this design, is there ways that you could just soften that?
There probably are. We probably could go with some other way. That was one of the ideas we came up with, since we are filling it, and it is only 4 feet high. Sometimes it tends to look a little bigger, but it goes from about 12 inches to 4 feet at its maximum height. But, you know, if that would be something that we could work out on as well, you know, just berm it out instead of just, you know, cutting it short.
Right, instead of such a rigid line that
Right.
somehow it's, so maybe a more natural landscape.
Right.
Okay. Yes,
I just have a few comments. You know, I think there's a fine line between the beautiful houses that you show pictures of. I mean, this may be one of them, and it may not. It's really a lot of the finite details, the grouting with the brick and the exact coining and the balusters, are they oversized or not? I just, you know, it's a very fine line. And these sort of generic type renderings make it more difficult to think that it's going to turn out well, but what I'm trying to say is staff has to really work closely with you to be sure all these details are right. A couple of things, though, I've noticed, and I'm wondering about. It seems like if you look at the other great houses that you show, some of which are good and some of which are not, by the way, I'm just wondering if the proportion of window to wall is slightly small in your house, particularly on the side walls, maybe not so much the front. The balusters look slightly overscale to me. And then in the back, I think the garage is just kind of slapped on, and I think the architecture should respond slightly to it, to the presence of that garage door, and that's just a question of detailing a little bit more around it. These are relatively minor comments, but again, I think there's a fine line between getting this right and getting it to be kind of a McMansion, and even a small one, and I think you don't want that, and certainly we don't either.
yes, Diana.
Yeah, I just want to echo some of the chair's concerns about landscaping, because this district is characterized by the style of building and some very similar ones. And of course, and also Commissioner Bland's comments about the attention to the details. But the landscaping is very prominent in this district. And it adds to the beauty of the district. So I hope that the applicant is really going to provide some significant vegetation foliage, you know, in the future that would be, you know, would complement this building, and some of the suggestions made, I think, could be pursued now. Anyway, so.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you, we'll call you back. Take public testimony. Kelly Carroll?
And I had a question. I got an email from Douglaston Little Neck Historic Society, and they asked if I could read for them in addition to HDC. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, so I'll read my statement first.
You're reading from Little Neck, Douglaston Little Neck Historical Society
That's
first?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. With the unique opportunity to design within a New York City historic district, HDC regrets that the formula proposed epitomizes the ubiquitous house of suburbia. There is an array of style within the district to inspire new construction, and the current proposal does not appreciate the vernacular of Douglaston Historic District. And this is from Douglaston Little Neck Historic Society. Another proposal for a generic brick box in the Douglaston Historic District and very close to an inappropriate building constructed just prior to designation. There are now many of these safe buildings in the district. They offer little interest and defy the pattern of architectural excellence and variety in Douglaston. 233-17 is one of the lots in the low-lying southern portion of the block between Bay Street and 38th Drive. The block, adjacent to the 57 blocks of Douglas Manor, was added to the district by the Commission in 1997 because of the important distinction of the early 20th century buildings on Bay Street to the north. The floodplain nature of the property requires a high building, but the townhouse appearance, featuring 6 reduced from 9 steps and a single rise at the front entrance, is inappropriate, as are the decorative coins. The balustrade above the front entrance is overly elaborate, and the fence on the left and the retaining wall on the right, as well as the lack of windows on either side, add to the enclosed look of the plan. The long driveway on the western line, leading to a sharp U-turn into the garage, can be relieved by entering the garage on the western side of the building and eliminates extensive paving into the back property. We believe the Commission can work with the owner and architect to achieve a better plan, one that will contribute to the historic district. Thank you.
Thank you. Christabel Guff?
Christabel Goff for the Society for the Architecture of the City. At a recent meeting, there was a discussion of whether a design that was less than excellent and perhaps could benefit from further refinement should nevertheless be deemed appropriate because the term appropriateness somehow implied a lower standard. This is a question that comes up from time to time and has over the years. In winter 1986, in Village Views, our periodical, we interviewed a commissioner who recalled reviewing an item early in his term, a new building. That came in, and I was listening to the commissioners talk about it, and it was clear that they didn't think that the original submission was even a decent piece of architecture. And I asked, I think, Bill Conklin and Charles Platt if that was indeed the way they felt. And they said, well, yes, it is actually rather terrible, isn't it? And Kent Barwick said, but what is the standard? If we apply a standard that is asking for something more, what does that mean in terms of policy? And then the argument was made that historic districts derive their special character from clusters of older buildings that are superior in their design and their workmanship and their materials. Landmark regulation, even if relatively lax, has a tendency to make the whole area more cohesive, a more beautiful urban environment, so that over time districts can evolve from excellent to superlative. If, along the way, a new building is inserted that is less well conceived, less well executed, and of inferior materials, in the long run, the mistake will have nowhere to hide. Increasingly, it will stand out and detract just by comparison to its surroundings. So it was argued that the standard should be a new building, whatever its style, should be of a high quality in design and materials, as high a quality as the buildings that led to district designation in the first place. And on many, many occasions, the Commission and the staff have been able to suggest changes that were transformative. Douglaston contains very few buildings from the early 19th century and a number of colonial revival houses, all of which have an informal, bucolic character with rambling wings and porches set back deeply into their extensive gardens, part of a rural landscape. The style is difficult but not impossible to match. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers? We received a resolution from Community Board 11 that recommends approval of this project. They've included a few suggestions. One is to widen the front stairs to approximately the width of the porch. At the north elevation, consider adding a second window on the upper floor on the left side. Consider using pairs of windows at the east elevation on either end of both the lower and upper floors. At the west elevation, there are no windows on the left side. Consider adding windows on both the lower and upper front to minimize the blank exterior wall. All right. Do you want to respond to any of the comments that were made? Right. Okay. Do we have any questions or comments for the commission? Yes.
Yeah. I think for me, the page L010, where they show examples of precedents, tells the story. It shows an array of buildings that range, some of which I would say would be projects that would come up to the standard that Ms. Goff just spoke about, and some of which really don't. And I think I see it as my responsibility anyway here to make sure that they come out as good as the good ones and not anywhere near as bad as the bad ones. And I'm afraid that this is zooming in exactly right on target for the bad ones. I think that the choice of siting and general site approach is appropriate, although I think Meenakshi's comment about the retaining wall and the treatment of the grading is, I agree with that. I think that there's no need to create a retaining wall, and that using natural methods would be a better way to make that transition. And I think the size and the general choice of a kind of a Georgian-ish vocabulary is fine. But I don't see a single thing that distinguishes this design, once one overcomes those kind of basic decisions, that distinguishes it from what I think most folks would consider to be a poor quality standard spec house. And I would look not only at the details, which I think the applicant just has to look very carefully at the good examples he shows: 105 Grosvenor, 25 Arley, 6 Westmoreland, 220 Forest, just on the sheet, and to shy away from the bad ones. And that has to do with proportion and detail. And I mean, Fred said there was a fine line. I think there's a very wide double yellow line between good and bad, and this is way over it. And I think we have to, the applicant has said, all right, we're going to do a traditional house, do it. Look at the stuff carefully, and make sure that it's being done properly. I think that the choice of materials also has to be looked at. I can't think of a single time where, in my short stay here, we've approved a job with FIPON on it. So I think that might be something that you would want to lose right off the bat. I think that using precast standardized elements like coins and keystones is a recipe for disaster. I think you got to really look look again at the detail level.
Okay, other comments? Yes, Roberta, and then Michael.
I agree with some of the things that was just said. And I think that, on one hand, yes, we understand that if you're doing a house and you come in and you want to present something that is not, so it doesn't have to be like, the top of the design level, but it needs to be something that is representative of what the commission thinks, since the commission is appropriate, is appropriate by definition. I think using the same definition that we would use if it were a larger building, where we spend lots of time looking at apartment buildings and commercial buildings, new buildings, and we talk about not only the details that are shown in terms of how they represent a particular style, but we talk about them in terms of how they represent what we want to see happen in the community, in that district. And I think that we have to look at houses, even houses this size, which are smaller, the same way. And it may be that we can't say what it has to happen to improve this, because it's difficult, and that's the thing. But I think that it has to be rethought, and I think that, yes, the whole question of materials is important, and when I looked at what they were using, I also thought that it should be a house that you could actually use, this garage from, whatever Cedars, and that it should be something that is more special and that required more thought. And so I guess I think that it needs to
Michael and
be
then Fred.
rethought and brought back, and that the only thing I could say is to look at, as was said before, the better examples in the community, and to just think about it as being a representative house in a community and not something that could have been a spec job.
I agree. I mean, I think that, first of all, your general comment that this house may be small but should deserve some attention, I think that I completely agree with that. I think sometimes what happens is if you have an existing building, it's enlarged or added upon, they draw cues from the existing features. Here you have something where it could be any one of these kinds of houses, and so it places a different I think, challenge for the commission. And I would agree with Commissioner Bland about, and in fact, all the commissioners who've just spoken up, about the need for more detail to sort of understand and support this project. Michael and then Fred?
I guess the fundamental question I ask myself is if we were designating this district today, would we vote to include this building in it? And I think my fundamental answer is no. And then the next question you ask is, well, why? And that all goes back to essentially Michael's statement about details. I mean, the first thing that I see when you look at those buildings that seem to be successful in the array of photographs, those which have an extending portico that are 1/3 or just less than 1/3 of the proportion of the entire facade are the ones that are most balanced and successful. And so this kind of suggestion of a portico becomes something that belittles the building. Also, once you expand that, once you spread that portico out, then you take that slope of the roof down so it's not so completely jarringly different from the hip roof behind it. The balustrade is incredibly heavy. The coins, actually, there is an historical tradition for the use of coins, which is completely gone against in this situation. When you're looking at a coin, which is meant to pull those facades together and provide stability, what you're looking at, when you're looking at a long piece, you're looking at the length of a stone, so that when you go around the corner, you're looking at the end. So it's short on one face, long on the other. The way these are arranged on this particular building, you're looking at the short dimension each time, so it's complete pastiche. It's the details that really need to get worked out on this that would, for me, then make it able to be included in the district.
Fred?
I don't want to pile on, but in a way, I think I do want to pile on because I think I was way too soft in my and I think these extraordinary historic districts that are made up of single-family houses, and we have them in Queens and also in the Bronx primarily. The good ones, well, the whole districts, and then the good houses deserve better neighbors than I think maybe this commission has recently, and I put myself in this camp, have been able to allow to get built. I think somehow we're sort of more focused or more able, let's say many of us, not all of us sitting around the table, more able to criticize and critique new brownstone type houses, row houses and so forth, but these houses are different, and I think what we've been seeing are just not good enough generally, and this one is not good enough. The fact that the applicant has put an array on one page half good and half really bad is a little bit of a warning sign, you know, because they're all here to be plucked from together, and they shouldn't be. So again, I think it's back to the drawing board. There's nothing wrong with the basic mass, the basic idea of this simple, very, very, very simple house, but the details have got to be worked out in a lot more convincing way than they have been. And let me just say that somehow the rendering, using whatever modeling you're using, is contributing, at least in my mind, to it's a terrible image, actually. And I think just don't come back with this rendering program. Use some other program, something. A hand sketch would be more compelling than this, because I think this rendering style lends me to believe that the house is going to look like this. Anyway, sorry that I'm going on and on.
Whereas the elevation on page 2, the little elevation, is actually, I think, an okay place to start. Right, and so the question is, I mean, so is it that rendering that's just making it look as bad as we're saying?
The white coins are not helping you.
Right,
they're not.
And the extent of relief from the elevation, not enough relief in some cases, too much in others, I think that's an issue as well. But to start with this elevation, I think would be a good thing. I mean, despite your issues with the coining.
All right, this is what I suggest. Are there any other comments? All right, we'll ask the applicant to come back. I think they can work with staff to get some advice from our preservation crew. They're excellent at understanding these details, and work with them. I think that they should think about the landscaping as well and incorporate that into the design. And I just want to point out one thing, which I know that Roberta mentioned, which is about this, and Fred did, about the garage at the back, and it will be visible from other angles. It does look like it's just slapped on and not really incorporated. And this is only my comment, which is I don't know if this garage works, because you go in and I don't know, you back into it. It just seems very awkward over there. So if you could just take a look at that as well. Okay, so we'll have the applicant come back. Okay, and we can close the hearing.